Right, we are live on LinkedIn, we're live on Facebook, and we have a treat installed for you all. And it relates to ultra running, it relates to the psychology behind ultra running, it relates to mental hacks, and I have the most exciting panel with me. I will bring them in from the green room now, if I can operate this correctly. Boom, boom, boom. So, in no particular order, let's start with the gentleman with the cap on. It's Jamie Sparks, the co-founder of Ultra X. Hello,
hey, Jacob.
And welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So, and then below Jamie, at least on my screen, we have, why don't you take you drive. We have Anne-Marie Watson, who is not only an exceptional elite ultra runner, she is also a performance coach. So I'm sure she will be able to enlighten us on many of the correlations between running trails and a successful day job and a successful life. So no pressure. And then we have Hello. Well, we've got a title there stuck in. Let's see how we can.
What do you mean by that?
Right, we've got the.
Oh yeah.
How are we gonna? That doesn't work so well.
Can you move where this goes?
We can't move where that goes. I'm wondering whether we. Let me worry about that. Okay, and we got Stephen Capello from Thomas International, where he's a senior psychologist, and his role in this is also super relevant because of some collaboration that we have done over the last 6 months, and more on that in a moment. So we have some exciting questions, both from my end, but also indeed from our audience, and we're able to take questions here live. And I'm wondering if those questions, if they appear there. Let's try that. Hi there. No, that's not it. Chat, that one. So if anybody asks questions, you can bring them in there by highlighting that and press show. Okay?
Okay.
So we might get some questions, but if we don't, let's go back into captions. So yeah, welcome to the panel. So let's start with an easy one. This one for you, Anne-Marie, and then let's get the other ones out. Boom. Okay, Anne-Marie, ultra running. In a few words, what is it?
Well, in a nutshell, ultra running can be defined as anything that is over 50 kilometers. Though, to be honest, I think that kind of distance definition is a little bit kind of, I don't know, it's very broad, it's very generic, because actually ultra running is an absolutely huge discipline. And it has so many different niches that you can kind of go and specialize in. So whether it is a 50K, whether it's a 100K, whether it's a 100-miler, or then actually can you go multi-stage? So there's distance side of things. So ultimately it's everything over 50K. But then you also have the time barrier. You know, you have some people who love the 24 hours and a timepiece. How far can you go in 20 hours? And you're going to be clocking up the distance. And then you can bring the different terrains into it as well. Do you love running on a track? Are you more kind of tempted by the harsh environments? Do you like mountains, deserts, or ice? So ultimately it is a distance, but actually within that there is so much more to go and explore.
Very well. So a smorgasbord of running by the sound of it. I'm going to switch to Jamie for a bit of color on this, okay? Jamie, ultra running used to be the odd cousin of long distance running. Now, more recently, it's increased rapidly in popularity, partially thanks to firms like yours. Why do you think that is? Why has it become so popular?
That's a good question. I think for the last 15, 20 years, we've seen a change in spending. People are spending less on objects and more on experiences generally. Travel around the world is getting cheaper with airline prices and fares coming down. We very much seen trail running as where triathlons and Ironman was 15 years ago. So at the beginning of a huge steep curve. And yeah, you're very right to say that it's just growing as a sport massively. And I think very much what we're trying to do is make it more accessible to younger and younger people. So for sure, it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, just for some people would say, not us, but some people would say that it was for, the midlife, the 40-year-old male accountant, perhaps a professional, who just wanted to push themselves.
Yeah.
And they've typically been quite expensive until more recently. But we're actually seeing a huge rise in younger people, 25 years and plus, that are starting to get into the ultramarathon world from doing no running at all. It used to be you do your 10Ks, your half marathons, your marathons, and then it would be the natural step up. But we're seeing, 40% plus of our customers have never even run a marathon, and now they're getting into the ultra scene. So it's a really fascinating time to be in the sector.
Excellent, thank you. Let me direct a question at you, Stephen. As I alluded to in our intro, we collaborated on a study of leaders who run these races, and I think from memory it involves some 50 plus leaders. Could you give us a few words on that study that we did?
Absolutely. So I'm an occupational psychologist. I work quite a lot in leadership and looking at the psychology that actually predicts successful leadership. We partnered a while back to look at specifically ultra marathon running leaders and how they were different. So we looked at their personality and we looked at basically their motivations for running as well. And it was really, really interesting to see the differences between ultramarathon runners in terms of executives and non-executives, but also ultramarathon leaders and your kind of average leaders. So yeah, really, really interesting study. By 50 plus leaders.
Okay. Thank you. Let's turn to our virtual audience for a moment. We have a question. Again, super simple one, but I suspect that the answer might be a little bit more complex. Why do people run ultra marathons? Anna Marie. Thanks, Scott.
Difficult. I don't know. It's like it kind of started off myself. How can I push myself? And it was either stick to my time thing. So to be honest, I didn't really.
Anna Marie, I'm struggling to hear you. You seem to be frozen on my screen. I don't know if now it's disconnected. So this is good practice. So I'd imagine Anna Marie will join us in a moment again. So let's turn the same question. This is not so much about why you are running. Let's talk about why do you think people are running these marathons? Jamie, do you have a view on that?
I think it's a human characteristic to want to challenge ourselves and to push ourselves. Humans since the dawn of time have wanted to see how far they can go. In the 60s we put man on the moon. The Industrial Revolution, technology, where we are now. And I think in its simplest form, humans want to see how far they can push themselves and how deep they can go. Yeah. That's one of the main constants that I see that ultramarathon runners say throughout is, I want to experience my limits. So I think that's probably a pretty strong defining characteristic of why people run ultras. And then there's, the social side of things and the travel side of things. meeting other like-minded individuals who also like doing these, crazy things, traveling around the world. You can use ultramarathon running as a vehicle to experience the world in some amazing places. Our races take place in Jordan, in Wadi Rum Desert, which is one of the most spectacular places I've ever laid eyes on.
Yeah.
In the Mexican copper canyons, in the rainforest of Sri Lanka. So I'd say the three reasons: to push themselves, to meet other people, and to expand their relationship base, and to travel the world.
Nice. I think we've got Anna Marie back in the green room. So Anna Marie, we got cut off. The question was, why do you think people elect to run ultras?
There are so many different reasons. And just to kind of share my own personal side of things, it was very much I'd run a couple of road marathons and wanted to kind of push myself further. So it was the distance and seeing what happened from a physical and mental perspective as I kind of was out there for longer. Though it was also the opportunity to explore the world, to kind of get off, into some really remote environments, off the beaten track. To see some beautiful, stunning places, and also just to be part of a community as well and spend time with like-minded people. I've been lucky enough to race in some phenomenal places that you just don't kind of see if you just go on, like, I don't know, holiday, for example. It just adds a real kind of different challenge to kind of push yourself in a real focus that I find. And having talked to, a lot of friends, they have very similar what they get out of it.
Yeah. No, very good, very good. Stephen, back to you for a moment. Looking at the psychological profiling from our study, can you derive any notable patterns in terms of who signs up for these races?
Well, it's interesting hearing from Anne-Marie and Jamie, because there's actually an academic measure of the motivation for marathon runners called Motivations of Marathon Runners Scale, an academic measure that's been used in multiple different studies. And sure enough, it's achieving personal goals is the biggest kind of cited reason that people run ultramarathons. It's not really about competition. It's not about recognition. So that kind of sense of belonging and that really pushing yourself side of things, seeing what you can do, is very much the reason why people suggest. There were some slight differences in our study, because obviously these were kind of executives that we were looking at. They were still big kind of reasons, but also kind of psychological coping, which basically the kind of relieving of stress and kind of unwinding and running ultras for that reason. And that's why people were running, was coming along in our study as a much bigger kind of motivator for people, which kind of makes sense in people with much more stressful jobs.
Very good. Back to you for a moment, Anne-Marie. How much of these challenges would you say is a mental game?
You can kind of look at this. I think there were some figures, kind of some percentage that I can't remember who made it up, and they were like, it's basically like 90% mental and 10% everything else. And you can kind of argue the percentages, though the mental perspective and the determination is an absolutely huge factor. Ultimately, at some point in the ultra game, however much preparation you've done, however much training you've done, however much you've sorted your kit and your nutrition and your hydration, at some point you are generally going to hit a spot where it hurts. And it's ultimately, how do you manage yourself and get through that, and avoid the kind of the dreaded DNF, which ultimately in itself is a lesson that you kind of go through, and it makes you a stronger athlete because you kind of learn from it. Though it kind of comes back to that kind of like belief in yourself. I find that is like the core of it. Can you believe actually what you're setting out to do? And I very much kind of link this back to the business world as well. It's having that kind of genuine inner belief that you can do it, that kind of unwavering certainty that you can kind of push on through. And ultimately, it's going to be the mind game that keeps you going. And it's having those strategies to kind of break it down, whether it's, something, the counting game or the breathing game, or kind of keeping track of time and bribing yourself with food, or kind of getting yourself to the finish and having kind of some mental visualization kind of going on, breaking it down into manageable chunks. It is all about the mental game when you're out there.
Very good. And that kind of dovetails nicely into another question from the audience. And you alluded to it earlier. How does running help with the day job? That one I'm going to send to Anne-Marie.
So for me, it's kind of, I don't know, there's many different factors. I think the main kind of couple on a day-to-day basis is, for me, running as a release. So I don't run every day. I do believe as a runner, actually having cross training is really beneficial. So I could do kind of cycling and yoga, etc., etc. But I do find that the running is a release. It's a break. It's a getting out there. It's that element of movement, how that kind of shifts your thoughts, and actually having kind of like a connection to nature. For me, that is a massive big thing. And it's kind of having that soft fascination. So your mind kind of, it gives it a chance to kind of start processing through the facts of the day. It kind of goes into that unconscious space, and often you kind of start to join the dots. And I know that, I've had some amazing ideas when I've been out running, and I've kind of spoken to friends and work colleagues as well, that they're like, actually, when I've been out for a good run, it's cleared the head. I've had some amazing innovative ideas, and I've come back feeling like super, super productive. So I do find that kind of that benefit is great for the day job. There's kind of the other avenue as well, where it's kind of like taking like a step back. And for me, it's kind of having a look at running and what do I want to achieve from running. Having a look at, like, my annual schedule, for example, and thinking, okay, so what goals have I got in there? What are my A races? What are my B races? What do I want to achieve? Where do I want to travel? Who do I want to meet? How can I kind of break that down? So that's kind of like my overall kind of running kind of purpose so much, for the next year, 5 years, 10 years. And I think for your day job as well, I think it's healthy to have that element of looking ahead and planning. Almost you can kind of get a bit stuck in a rut and things become like a little bit status quo, samey. So actually being able to kind of step back in your job and kind of go, okay, so what do I actually want to achieve this year? What are my key goals? Whether that is working on a specific project, whether that's kind of publishing a certain book, whether that's forming a certain network. I just think it's a really useful metaphor that you can kind of bring kind of and learn from both.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I mean, there is a little follow up to that question, and I think you broadly covered the main chunks of it. But in terms of portable techniques into the workplace, from either training, and here I'm not talking necessarily running extreme distances. I mean, it could be a treadmill, or it could be a 5K, or it could be prepping for a marathon. But in terms of techniques that you feel that are directly portable into the workplace, what would be sort of your top picks?
So I think my top pick is one about self-care. So ultimately, if I am running and I'm training, I really need to look after my body, and it is very much looking after the physical, kind of the mental and the emotional side of things. That's making sure that I'm sleeping, eating, hydrating, meditating, enjoying the company of like friends and family. And actually that aligns completely to the day job. Ultimately, if you want to be able to be focused, paying attention, to be creative, to be productive, you want to be able to, look after yourself so that you are switched on at work, that you're kind of making the right connections, that you're engaged, that you're listening, that you're asking the right questions, and you actually be able to kind of put the productive work in so that you're performing at a certain level. So I think that self-care is absolutely critical, that you can kind of cross over into both of them. I think there's also an element of running as well, and this is something that kind of it sometimes gets a little bit forgotten about, is this kind of the success of it. Kind of when you're going out running, yes, you're enjoying it and you're in the moment, and you may travel to some like amazing places and do some phenomenal events. And a lot of the time, you put a lot of training in. It takes a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of effort. Actually, when you've done something and you've tackled a big challenge, it's all about celebrating. Like, just stop, pause, recognize what you have achieved, and take pleasure in that. And, share it with others, because it really does inspire others to kind of get out there and do things. And I think within the day job as well, we can also kind of get stuck in that trap of, you kind of go from one project to the next project, you get the next promotion, you're kind of going up the career ladder, and you often don't spend time to kind of appreciate what you have actually done and celebrate your successes. So I think kind of the two S's, kind of self-care and success, are two things that you can really draw from running into your day job.
Very good. Love it. Okay. Just back to you for a moment, Stephen. Based on the feedback from the poll that we ran, what parallels do you see in terms of what predicts performance in sports and performance in the workplace?
So quite a lot, actually. So the tool we used called the High Potential Trait Indicator it's a personality measure that looks specifically at traits that that predict performance within the workplace, which is why I was so interested for using this for ultramarathon running executives. Broadly, those executives were very similar, very highly conscientious, diligent, achievement striving. That was the kind of big driving force that we spoke about. They're also very typically well adjusted, so they can deal with stresses in the workplace. That was something that typically isn't seen in the ultramarathon running population more widely. So some of the research that I looked at, that wasn't necessarily there. So our sample was slightly different there. Curiosity and openness is something that's very important in the workplace in terms of liking novelty, wanting to explore new ways of doing things and do something different. That's also really important in marathon running. I think the experiences that the others have shared around going to new places, exploring new things, that kind of drive is something that is also useful in the workplace. So those are, I think, the three main things that we really see as really key factors that lead to success in the workplace, and certainly ones that we see within our population that we studied.
Very good. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Jamie, you have with your co-founder Sam launched a number of events in very volatile, very unpredictable locations. Your company is young, and now you're embarking on hosting the first ever, correct me if I'm wrong here, first ever Ultra Trail World Championships next year. You've attracted some of the biggest names in the sport to take part. What's your secret salsa here? What's behind the meteoric rise of Ultra X?
Oh, I love it. I love it how you describe this as launching races in volatile places. It's safe to say that, yeah, when we started Jordan in 2016 and you know, obviously borders with Iraq and Syria and the whole ISIS thing was going on, it was definitely a question that we saw more of, is Jordan a safe place to go to? But things have calmed down considerably now in that region. And I'd say all our races are in relatively stable places. And, you know, but that's one of the reasons why people choose to go to these adventurous locations. With regards to the World Championships, when we started the business, it was one of the three big goals that we were going to try and achieve, which was to find out who the king and queen of the multi-stage ultramarathon world were, and we really wanted to reward the athletes who are not rewarded as other sports people are. Footballers, cyclists, triathletes, they all are earning millions of quid a year. That is not the case with ultra runners, and it's very much one of our aims to promote these, you know, incredible athletes and to help them become the best professionals they can be. So it's true to say that, yeah, in June next year, we're hosting the first multi-stage World Championships in Slovenia, 250 runners, 100 of which will be some of the best professionals in the world, and we've secured an amazing lineup. It'll be one of the biggest prize pots in ultramarathon history, with £50,000 being distributed through stage winners, the podium. We're introducing things like King of the Mountains, King of the Sprints. We're trying to gamify the multi-stage ultramarathon scene. Hopefully we'll televise it. You know, it also helps, just because you said, you know, how we're rising and growing our speed. It helps that we've got good financial backers. We recently had a round come in from another venture capital firm, and they really believe in our vision of turning, you know, these incredible races, 5-day races, through amazing environments, and then becoming bigger and bigger and more popular. So our overall aim is, you know, in 10 years to have 40, 50, 60 Ultra X races all over the world, for all sorts of different people in different markets. So we've had a you know, really good and encouraging first 2 years. Of course, COVID-19 has absolutely put the handbrake on for the last 9 months.
Yeah.
But, you know, we hope that, you know, within the next 6 months, things will start to pick up again. Fingers crossed for that vaccine.
Very good. All right. just back on mindsets for a moment, and back back to you, Anne-Marie. Can you share with us your top hacks for developing a mindset for ultra running and business as a performance coach? What would be your top hacks if you look at, I said, ultra running and business in one?
I always encourage people to kind of bring it back to, like, what do they really want out of it? What do they want out of running? What do they want out of business? Because having that kind of core purpose and understanding what your driver is and what your motivation is, that is really powerful. Without that, it kind of can be like a little bit wishy-washy. So it really needs to be like a really core driver that kind of really, really motivates you. And I found this in some races. Like, there's been some races that I've really just been desperate to do, like almost borderline obsession, and I've poured my heart and soul into them, and actually that is when I've had the results. The ones that have just kind of been a little bit meh, oh, I'll just kind of go along, then actually there's no driver, there's no kind of oomph, there's nothing to kind of really get your teeth into. So I always find that actually before you even get to any of kind of like the little hacks and tricks and tops and tips, you really need to have the foundations. So spend some time like really just doing like a little bit of soul searching and like, actually, what are you really getting out of it? And for you, not for other people. This is something that you kind of want to do for yourself, rather than trying to, I don't know, please others or for somebody else, or just for kind of like some material gain. So kind of just get super, super clear on that. Because ultimately, once you've got super, super clear on that, that is what gives you the driver. So when things start getting a little bit tough, whether it's the middle of the night and you've been running for 15 hours, actually just kind of bringing that back to the forefront can really encourage you just to kind of put one foot in front of the other. And the same with work. You know, there's going to be pinch points when you're pulling an all-nighter, or you're kind of working with a colleague who's maybe somewhat frustrating. There's a bit of conflict. You've got some tricky conversations kind of going on. You've been traveling around the world, and then you've got like a meeting first thing and you're all jet lagged. Actually bringing it back to, okay, what is my purpose? What am I influencing? What am I achieving? That really kind of brings it back to the heart of the entire matter. And then it's all about kind of getting to know yourself and understanding like what kind of motivates you. And everybody is different. Like some people, it is very much having a mantra and being kind of kind, even if it's just something kind of really simple. And for me, a lot of the time, you know, it's, you know, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I got it. I got it. And just like literally just repeating that over and over and over again, one step at a time, is what it is kind of all about. And it's the same for kind of work as well. It's having that positivity, that positive psychology that actually, you know, I've got the skills, I've got the expertise, I've got the knowledge, I can do this. And actually, if I haven't, who can I speak to? Yeah. So a lot of the times it's like, okay, so what can you learn from others? You don't actually have to need to know everything. So actually in this development of the mindset, you don't have to come up with all the answers yourself. Speak to other people, speak to your community, whether that's the ultra running community, people who've been doing it for a while, or within your kind of work network, speak to them as well and find out what works for them and test it out. I mean, then it may not work for you, that's fine, but then try something else out. So it's been really open to explore the different ways of doing things. And you know, simple things like for me within the running game, it sometimes can just literally be back to the counting game, and kind of bringing it back to the 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10 and back again, and just literally passing time one foot in front of the other. Because there can be times when, you know, running wise, I want to like sat down at the side of a path and burst into tears and not go on any further, but actually just kind of pushing on through. Things shift and things change. And it can be the same with a work project. You may feel that you're getting absolutely nowhere. You've got absolutely no traction. You can't kind of, the project brief is changing so much, you kind of can't keep up with it, or your resources have been cut. Okay, bring it back to the, you know, the present moment, breathe, and then do what you can do. You know, control the controllables. That's kind of what it kind of comes back to.
Love it. You're brimming with knowledge, Anne-Marie. Really appreciate it. Let's shift to back to our research. So here's one for you, Stephen. Ultra running leaders, are they different to other leaders? And assuming the answer to that is yes, in what way?
Not as much as you'd think. This was the really interesting thing that came out of the research, that our ultra running executives were more similar to other executives than we'd possibly thought. So again, very highly kind of driven, motivated, conscientious people, very emotionally stable, very curious, like novelty, able to confront risks, and competitive to a point. The one aspect that was slightly different is, and it was a kind of quite a small difference, was in a desire for complexity and ambiguity. But our executives weren't, our ultra running executives weren't quite as high. But certainly from the research we did, ultra running executives are more similar to other executives than other ultra marathon runners who personality wise are slightly different in some aspects.
Okay. So would you say that the psychological makeup of a leader is more likely to be the demographic that the likes of Jamie Sparks is looking for, you know, to attract? Because you said they're naturally curious, they're more curious than your average, and they may be more inclined to put themselves into situations where there are more unknowns, more variables, or is it not as simple as that?
I think it's bizarre how similar looking for success in the workplace and looking for success in sports seems to be. I think the same kind of innate pieces that you have in terms of being very driven, very achievement striving, and having a proactive approach seem to be what drives success in the workplace, and that's successful senior management, but also success in other roles.
Yeah.
Also seems to relate to sport as well. You seem to need to have those pieces to be able to achieve that. That's what we seem to see.
Very good. Okay. Finally, another simple question, but again, probably a complex answer. What makes a successful leader? Jamie, what do you think makes a successful leader?
Whoa, that's broad, but I'll try and narrow it down. A clear vision. You have to know exactly what you want to achieve, your company wants to achieve. Communication. You need to be able to transmit that message, that goal, all those aims to the lieutenants or the staff. Empathy. You need to understand that everyone is built differently. And then I think context. You have to understand what your different staff members are wanting out of life, you know, because if you understand what they want to achieve, then you can plan around that. If someone is motivated by money, then maybe you'll change your commission structure so that they can profit more that way. If someone, works really hard, but desperately wants to work, 3 days at home because they've got a family, but you can trust them and they're a skilled worker, then you can allow them to do that. If you know that someone works better, once if you're on their back, driving them forward every day, keeping them focused. So I think you've got to understand the different sorts of people that work with you. You've got to communicate to them, you've got to understand them, and then you've just got to have a really clear message.
Anne-Marie, what would you add to that list?
This is such a complex question, and how many books have been written on the subject? And leadership is the one thing when I'm working within business is that this is basically what I coach around. It is leadership, whether that's like director level, VP level. This is like the $1 million question. I'd say that we still don't really know. We like when you look at leaders around the world, there's a lot of work still to be done. Yeah. And just to kind of share a couple of topics that I found that are coming up at the moment, particularly within COVID, a lot of it has to do with authentic leadership, particularly as the boundaries between work and life have got increasingly blurred just due to circumstance. Actually, it's about having that real human connection, and actually as a leader showing up as who you are as a person, as opposed to kind of adopting this kind of facade of a leader, and you kind of are then beyond, connection. So it's kind of having that authentic leadership. It's about ultimately knowing your values and then living and being them, and yes, aligning them with the organization, and kind of being authentic around that. And then I'd say it very much kind of comes down to collaboration as well, and how you are compassionate with your employees.
Yeah.
And how you build those relationships, because it is all about relationship building. And I think we often forget that within business, and it becomes very task and output focused, and actually you really need to bring it back to the people.
Really good. There's some really good content there, guys. Stephen, anything you could add to what makes a successful leader, based on add to what you've just heard from Jamie and Anne-Marie?
Well, first of all, I'd echo what Anne-Marie says, that I think there's a lot that's kind of unexplained. I think from a psychological perspective, the kind of things that we can measure someone's kind of personality, we can measure their cognitive ability. And it tends to be the factors we're talking about: someone who's driven and disciplined and ambitious, someone who's kind of well-adjusted, someone who's able to confront risk. These kind of things that we've been talking about, the same kind of things for sport. But there's only so much this can predict. I think there's still quite a lot that is very contextual, very situational, and very dependent on the actual organisation itself.
What do you make of Anne-Marie's comment, which is very, very relevant? That in the last 6 months, there's been a shift, and Anne-Marie is talking about that you might be having a one-to-one with your boss, but you're both sitting in your houses, and it's all a bit more personal, and you communicate in a different way. How, from your standpoint, what do you make of those comments?
I think whenever situations change, it falls back to what's actually important. If you're a proactive leader who will take this new challenge and run with it and adapt and be able to cope in this new climate, that's going to be something that's successful. I think, if anything, that the current situation is showing what successful leadership actually looks like, because the leaders that have been able to adapt and who've been able to change their styles are the ones that have been successful.
Yeah. No, very good. Right, panel. Let's bring the panel back if we can, and just remove the title. Panel. That's a wrap. You've been brilliant. Really thoroughly enjoyed your input. Thank you to our audience for the interesting questions. I think
If there's any questions.
Then, if there are any questions, which we will control, but I think we started. That's about 45 minutes, and that's perfect, guys. What did you think, Jamie?
I think it was great. It's nice that we all have things like internet connection are going to be important, aren't they, for fluidity and stuff?
Yeah.
So we'll go with that that setup, will we? There won't be any inter dialogues between the three participants.
I'm very open to ideas. So you mean questions from you to Stephen, or you to Anne-Marie, and vice versa?
Yeah, I guess I don't know what sort of format a LinkedIn Live is. Is it like perhaps more formal than other platforms? And should we keep it more scripted, like you nicely controlled there, or would we let it flow if the option arose, for example?
I don't know. I think as long as I'm quite open to ideas. What do you think would be? You're sort of you're a little bit the odd one out, Jamie. I'm trying to because the other two are all over the psychology and performance and mental side of it. But what do you think that you might like to see going across the between panelists?
No, nothing in particular. I thought that was really nice. I thought it was perfect. I was just wondering, if something popped up, would I interrupt and be like, "Oh, Stephen, that's quite interesting," or "Anne-Marie, what do you think about this?"
I think that could work really well. It could be for each of us to bat something over, and because obviously my stand on this is quite academic, so batting things over and learning from your experiences, I think, would be quite interesting.
I think it could be interesting. So if we, after each question, so I might be asking, you know, a question to so we just go through the questions. Why don't we now? I know it's a little bit scripted, but because we've got to bring the panel in and out. That I think it's if we go through the questions of saying, you know, ultra running, what is it? Then you're talking, when we're talking about the growing popularity, that's you, Jamie. So the first one was Anne-Marie, you, Jamie, about the growing popularity, and then a few words around the study, that's you, Stephen, and then a pretend question from the audience about why people run these things. You all have a view on that.
I thought it was great, and also doing it that way, it means that we don't speak over each other, which is obviously something that we should really try and avoid. So I thought maybe it's perfect, mate. Actually, just keep it how it is, probably.
I'm just wondering whether it would be nice to first we have a question for them individually.
Yeah, and then when you do those,
and then we do the why do people run an ultra marathon? We bring you all in,
and then you just kind of go around,
and then maybe. I'm just wondering whether I'm just trying to find, because I quite like the idea, Jamie. Even if we have to sort of experiment a little bit about it, because I think a panel should be talking to each other. Yeah. If there is a smart way we can do that.
Yeah, I don't know. It just if there's a lag, you know, on someone's screen, then it just has the ability for us to speak over. If we were all sat next to each other, it would be easy. So
I'm just going to have a look at the flow of questions and see if there is a natural, and maybe share them with you guys, and then maybe you can look at it and say, are there some questions that are shouting out for a bit of roundtable that's less question answer. I'm just going to have a look, and I'll share that. As for any technical difficulties on the day, and obviously we lost Anne-Marie.
That was because I was on my phone initially, and I'm now on my computer.
Okay.
So I'll go on my computer.
Sure.
That should be fine.
Even if it happens again, or if the line drops here for whatever reason, then I will just start it again and send you possibly another link, because I'd imagine if this session dropped, then you'll be booted off, and I'd imagine that the link that I shared on WhatsApp will no longer work. I'd imagine that then when I go live again, it creates a new link. So that's why just make sure you've got access to that WhatsApp group. Obviously, if you get booted off, you just go back into the link and you'll be returning to the green room, and we'll take that in our stride. I don't think that's going to be that difficult. Guys, I actually think I think you're really good. I think the stuff you've got to share is really good. I think you're coming at it I think it's a good flow. And, I think you're keeping it nice and succinct, and that way we're avoiding it to be, just a series of monologues. I think we'll keep it, it's dynamic. 45 minutes is not a long time when there are 4 people in the room. So I thought it worked quite well with the questions and your answers. So is there anything we're missing, do you feel? Is there anything we should add?
Nothing jumps out from me.
Okay. I've created some captions which where we sort of got your handles and your, in Stephen's case, your email address and so on, and Andy will swap between the different captions for so people know where to go if they want to get to know you a bit more, I guess.
I think having the questions up is such a good idea, because especially if it's broad, I can so often like just diverse off into the universe and then have no idea where to bring it back. So to have that up is such a good idea.
Yeah, that's good.
Jacob, I'm going to have to jump off in a couple of minutes. I've got
I think we're good. I really appreciate your time on this test run. I'll drop an email to you if I have any inspired ideas around how we can do something crisscross in the panel. Otherwise, I think we'll stick with this format. I think we're good to go.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you for organising. Great to see you both.
Yeah, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
See you.
Ciao.
Bye now.
Click finish.
Oh, where's the up?